You're listening to Kahit, Saan here on Jeepney Cafe, only on 100.5 CFRO, Vancouver's Co-op Radio. We have your hosts here today. My name is Elle.
And I'm M.
And we also have Kuya Jord, working on making sure that everything is going okay on our sound. Say hi.
What up? What up?
Yeah. The first song that we had just playing there is Breadwinner by I think he's from Puerto Princesa. His name is Gio Ong. Breadwinner is the name of that song. Well, we just wanted to start off the hour by saying that we hope everybody's having a good October and that everybody is enjoying the good weather that we've been having lately. It's actually been kind of nice.
I went off sunny quite a bit. Sunny.
I went off to Edmonton like last week and it was really cold and it was like raining, but everybody that here in Vancouver was like, it's so sunny and hot.
You brought the rain with you?
I did, but luckily it was sunny at the last 2 days. But yeah, we also want to remind everybody that today is October 20th, which means voting day here in Vancouver.
Vote.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't already and you're eligible to vote, we hope that you'll go out there and take part. I believe voting is open until 8 p.m. today in all the locations.
Yeah, it was pretty easy, I found.
Yeah.
Like, you literally go in with your voting card, and then you vote, and then you go online, you put into the machine.
Yeah.
Like high school, Scantron.
Yeah. So there is still some time to go for those who haven't had the opportunity yet. And the line moves pretty quickly as far as I saw.
Yeah. So until 8 p.m., right?
Yeah, up until 8 p.m. today. Anyway, on to our show. Yeah.
On this show, today we will touch base on a lot of the different discussions that remain common in the Filipino community, mostly from a Filipino-Canadian perspective, to try to introduce these topics to those who may not be familiar with them. Additionally, because we, as the hosts, come having that perspective as well.
Yeah, so I think what we want to kind of establish is that we kind of come in, not necessarily with a bias, but we already have a point of view in certain things, but we acknowledge that, that's where we're coming from, but our individual experiences, it doesn't necessarily speak for everybody that's part of this Filipino-Canadian community. It's made out of different types of people with different kind of individual experiences. In fact, I think personally speaking, I acknowledge that maybe the points that we do share with a lot of the community only encapsulates about a small percentage, just because of how many different experiences that we have. And so part of that, has to do with it kind of creates a separation in the community between, like, I guess, people from different generations.
Well, I think
so we kind of want to address that today.
Yeah, we should define the terms first, for sure. So how would you define new immigrants?
Okay, so I guess new immigrants are people who had just come here, right? So I guess maybe within the realms of like a few years, maybe.
Yeah. I would also think the same, that like someone who came in a few years ago is still very new and is still trying to adjust. I believe that the adjustment period is longer than just the first few months.
I mean, if we can go to like the technical kind of definition understanding, I guess it would be somebody who's not technically a citizen yet.
Yes.
They're like, I would say for like quote unquote new immigrants, they're within that time frame in which they're trying to get their citizenship, but they're still sort of new to the country. Yeah, I mean, as opposed to people who get their permanent residency. I think that's a different kind of like.
Yeah, I want to revisit that because after we define the terms, I think I want to just make it clear what exactly are the levels of which people stay here. Like first generation, I would assume is just the so if your parents weren't from here and then you came here,
like
first generation,
you weren't necessarily born here, but you came here.
So technically, we would both be first generation because even though I came when you came when you're 6?
Yes.
Question mark. I had a big question mark on my face when I said that. But yes, you came when you're 6, and I came when I was about 2. So technically, we're first generation. But I find I identify a lot with second generation because personally, I have no.
In the internet sphere, there's people who kind of claim it as 1.5 generation.
Oh, I guess
as
so.
those people who they came here very young, but they have the experiences that's very much more similar to second or third generation.
Yeah, I have one memory of the Philippines essentially, but so technically we're first gen, and then I guess I would consider myself 1.5.
Yeah,
and then second gen would be those whose parents were first generation, and
then they were born here.
They were born here or like born in the West of some sort.
Yeah, and then third gen would be their grandparents were here, their
and then fourth gen grandparents, so on, so on.
It kind of escalates in that sort of hierarchy.
Yeah. Right before we move to the other topics, I just have a quick question. So when people come here first, do they automatically have immigrant status, or is it more like
it depends what you come here for?
Okay,
if you come here with the purpose of immigration, then that's in the
in the paperwork.
Yeah, so when you come here, I believe mind you, this could have changed because it's been such a long time since we first came here, but you have to apply even like from the Philippines, even to come here. If you're going to visit, you still have to apply for a visa. So regardless of the fact, you still it's in the process, like that's how you kind of defined it legally.
And then after that would be like permanent residency, and then
that's
after
if they choose not to do a citizenship, so that's an option. Like,
so it's not like you have immigrant status and then you have permanent residency and then citizenship. You can just go from immigrant status possibly to apply for citizenship.
I wish I could comment on that accurately, but because I don't know whether or not the laws have changed.
All right, everybody, look online for your facts because we don't know. I'm just asking her things out of the blue.
Yeah, I'm not an immigration expert, so
for sure.
I wish I could answer all those questions clearly.
So I guess it just go into our next point of people having to come here due to necessity more so in the past versus coming here as part of a leisure activity.
Yeah, so kind of to explain what we mean by that. So a lot of the people that have come here, and I guess like myself, my family included, probably your family included as well, the families that have come here a lot more so in the past have come here as a result of trying to find employment and opportunities. It's not always the case. That is a very common thing, as we kind of discussed and touched on when we had our OFW episode back in June. So people looking for work, etc. Whereas now, what we see a lot more commonly happening are people coming from the Philippines, and they're here to like vacation. They're here to check some places out. I mean, it doesn't mean that people still aren't coming here to look for opportunities, but there's just more people nowadays who are able to.
Yeah, it's a different kind of situation, I guess. Like, would that touch upon like the difference between wealth and expectations, or is that a whole new topic?
Well, it kind of becomes part of it. So what tends to happen, and this is just something that I'm talking in regards to like coming from my own experience. Again, acknowledging that everybody has their own kind of experience, but those who have come here in the past to look for new opportunities, even now, usually they're the working class, and they come here because when you need new opportunities, it usually has to do with like trying to build more wealth that you can't necessarily access just by being back there, right?
Yes.
And so we're kind of like on the other side of that, when we're talking about people who are able to come here for leisure, then you're talking about people who have already somewhat accumulated wealth being there.
More so than like poverty level.
Yeah. Or like they could be working class level as well. That just really depends on
their situation.
Yeah, that depends on their situation. So with that, like when you see people coming there, or like they're coming here as international students, we see a lot of that too.
It's true.
And in order, I guess in general, in order to even be able to afford to be an international student, because you're not paying domestic fees, you need to have some sort of like amounts of wealth.
So class being a factor.
Yeah, it is.
Such as like where families are from, province versus cities in like the Philippines, right?
Yeah. So I think like when you have people that have been here for ages and their families come from that working class environment, versus people who are used to a certain other type of lifestyle, I think that's one aspect as well that creates like some sort of separation. Because I mean, regardless of the fact, like wherever you are, there's always going to be some sort of separation based on class.
It's true, but I think even like geographically, like being in the province is much harder to get to the city where the airports are.
Yeah, of course.
Like,
we will kind
thing.
of like that is part of the discussion as well. Like, and that comes with like the differences in like wealth, the differences in belief and stuff like that. Just exactly where you're from, just because there's such a difference between like someone who comes from the province and someone who comes from the city, right?
Yes, like especially because like job wise, if we're talking about work, right? There's a point about how profession's not fully translating over here. So
like for example, of what we find a lot of is if you were a professional in the Philippines, even for like 10 years or something, then doesn't always how do I explain it? Get accepted here.
Well, yeah, like
And
the
then you
level
have
of
to, like,
education and training.
you kind of have to. There's a lot of cases in which people have to get requalified for things and kind of start over from.
and a lot of times they can't, because how much does it cost to just get here?
Yeah.
Like, how many people do we know who are like fully qualified nurses, doctors, engineers, whatever, and they come here and they have to start again, either from whether it's in that field or they are elsewhere with a whole new job, just because their certifications or training or education didn't qualify here, because
Yeah.
it just wasn't recognized.
Yeah. So I mean, when you're talking about that, and then they have to start over, like your perspectives kind of change, your kind of belief systems that carry you through that. They sometimes do change, and I think that's also very different. Like if you're coming from a place, not to say that there's a lot more opportunity when you're coming from the Philippines, because obviously there's a lot of competition, and sometimes there's not a lot of resources. But you're in a place that you can tap into certain networks, as opposed to here when you kind of just have to start over. And so like you have those differing experiences there. So when you're talking about, and honestly I did want to kind of like write an analogy for this, but I just didn't have I didn't know how to properly put it, but it's kind of like you come from the same river, and then you kind of they go off into different streams. So you have you start off from the same place, and then you kind of, the direction that you go is completely different.
Are we still talking
even if
about
you're-
like careers?
careers, and how that kind of builds into how there becomes a separation within our community? Because you have people who are going to be considered professionals when they're back in Asia. You have people here that can't necessarily call that their reality.
Yeah, well, I think the separation that you're talking about also like exists between our families, like the relatives from back there and from here. And let's be real, a lot of the culture, like Filipino working class culture here, is sending money back, and it's like helping support those who.
But that becomes then generational wealth that's
Yeah.
the hope. It's not always the case, but that's the hope. And then
Yeah, but I mean, like, the separation ends up being that there's a lack of understanding that things are easier when you get here, and but really it's still a lot of work to gain just a bit of money to
Yeah.
be able to send back. And so I find that separation itself also creates misunderstandings, and it makes you feel, I feel like a lot of people I know who have immigrated here or who are recent immigrants say that like a lot of times they don't know how to connect with those back home because they feel misunderstood, and that's just because you have an ocean between you as well.
exactly.
So
Yeah. Anyway, we are going to take a little bit of a break, but
Yes,
we want to kind of not introduce. How do I say this?
Acknowledge.
We have here at Co-op Radio right now. We currently have a fall drive going on.
Yes.
Do you want to go into that a little bit, Em?
I do. So, I wanted to tell you guys more about why I joined Co-op Radio and the show that we are on specifically, because it's like a great thing to be able to support this radio station and make those donations so that it can keep running, and to help, like, not just convince you, but also just to give you something that maybe you can relate to, is that I have, for example, as an artist, I'm very interested in things that I haven't tried before. I mean, that's a human experience. We're interested in things we haven't tried before. And it was like a secret want, of course, to want to try radio, but also I'm very interested in like voice acting and whatnot. And so my friend over here, your host, Lou, decided to create a show. And originally it was more of a like...
It was more of a drama, yeah.
Drama, like I guess a radio drama. And the first year of Kahit, Saan was based on that drama, and it was about the first and second generation experience.
Yeah, we were like, the thing we're talking about right now. We were kind of trying to explain that through the drama. Yeah,
essentially everything that we talk about through Kahit Saan are things we do touch upon in that drama, and it was quite an interesting experience because we had, like, for example, some of them were recorded previously, and some things were done live,
which was a different experience.
It's true. Both had their ups and downs, I think, but I think that it was still very interesting to watch Elle like do all like the cup stirring and like the door closing.
Yeah.
It's fun. It was very interesting, and I found it was like a really great learning experience for all of us, especially because I got to work with Jen Serratos, for example, and Rich. I don't know how to say his last name actually.
I don't know how to say it.
Anyway,
Abarcas? Yes, thank you, Kuya Jordan.
and like a few others, like Kuya John, who's also a host here, and it was
Kuya Jordan as well, definitely.
Yes, so it was a very. I think it was a great community building experience, and in my opinion, as a little anecdote, I do agree that it's something that I wouldn't have been able to get any experience in, or even like join just for fun, if I had not heard about Co-op Radio, if we had not heard about Co-op Radio. So I think that for those
it
of
definitely
you,
opens a lot of opportunities for people
sure.
to kind of do different types of mediums. Yeah.
So for those of you who can like even somewhat relate to this, or even like really are like listening to this being like, yeah, that was a good thing, I think that should keep happening, because that's happened to so many other people who've come through this radio station. Like, you should really consider donating. And so you can donate online at coopradio.org, or even donate on the phone, 604-684-8494.
Yep, that's right. Anyway, we're going to go into our next song. The song is called Not All the World is America by Smoky Mountain, and it kind of talks about like a different perspective in the immigration experience, I believe. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And you're listening here to Kahit, Saan on Jeepney Cafe, only on 100.5 CFRO, Vancouver's Co-op Radio. You're listening to Kahit, Saan here in Jeepney Cafe, only on 100.5 CFRO, Vancouver's Co-op Radio. So we kind of went over how class and professions do create a separation between, and I guess resources and networks create a separation between people here, I guess, who are like first gen, second gen, etc., and new immigrants, and how like generational wealth can kind of come into a play for that. I think now what I would like to kind of cover is, I guess, personal experience. So I don't know about you, but when we were in high school, we went to a very like a Filipino large Filipino community, concentrated high school, I guess. And you could tell that even though there are lots of us, like maybe 70% of the population being Filipino, people didn't really hang out together in a very mixed bag. If you were like, so there were definitely like, you had people who were like, who grew up here. They hung out with people who grew up here. And then you had people who had just come here. And I guess like they would kind of be classified based on the fact that they were ESL students, and they would hang out on their own. There are some overlaps, but it didn't happen as commonly. It would kind of be like, hey, I know who you are because you're in my class for one of these things, but it's not like we're in the core friend group.
Well, personally, I think I have two things to say about that. I think the first one is that definitely language was a thing, especially because everyone I knew who had grown up like here like had very little connection to their language. I think you're an exclusion, but most people I knew who were there who were of Filipino descent didn't really know how to speak it, so therefore it was difficult to communicate with those who were. So yeah, the whole hi, you're in my class, but not really going much further. And I think the biggest one for me, I think that this is not necessarily for everybody, but for me it was the fact that the separation was definitely a thing. Like the fact that they were in mostly different classes, especially by a certain point. I had mostly electives, and I didn't and also I didn't know about about some of the community building things that were happening that had to do with like there was a Filipino club or whatnot. And I didn't even know about that until like 12th grade, and because I was forced to be on the yearbook.
But so to be fair, to give you a little bit of background on that Filipino club, just because I know the people who, or at least one of the people who organized it and people who took part of it, it was specifically focused towards new Filipino immigrants in order for them to adjust to the educational system here, because they wanted to build that kind of bridge that gap. So there wasn't really as much focus in trying to like have. I mean, there was some people who were first gen, second gen who would come to these club meetings, and I'd gone to one definitely, and they do try to mix up the population, but in general, like the main focus isn't to do that. That's
Yeah.
one of the main reasons.
I think I don't question the focus at all. I just like the fact that I didn't know about it at all, like that existed.
Yeah.
And,
But
like,
anyway,
I wish like it would have been a thing, and to be able to at least know that many people were still struggling. I had no idea about the population of people who had just come here because, like I said, it was like so. In our high school, I felt like it was so separated from what I was, like what my classes were and who I spent time with. Because when I wasn't in class, I just was in literally one area of the school, and it was only music related.
Yeah,
stuff.
but I mean, in general, like there, you saw that there was that separate. Like besides the fact that we were like separated by classes, like literal classes, there was a separation. Like when we'd have breaks, people wouldn't necessarily go up with each other and talk to each other because you knew, like, let's be real, a lot of the new immigrants already knew English, so it wasn't necessarily like a language barrier altogether. Like I couldn't pinpoint it to just that necessarily. And I mean, like, it kind of, based on my observations, it kind of became the point where, like, a lot of, there was a lot of mixing within, like, the Asian population in our school. It was pretty amicable. But as a result, like, there wasn't as much, like, effort to make the connection between, like, the new immigrants and I guess people who have been here for a while. I think part of that too is because of our upbringing. They're just so different. So what tended to happen is people who are Filipino Canadians who've been here for a while ended up really relating to their peers, like people who came from the similar background where their parents had just immigrated. And I think, like, as a result, we become this kind of like we become kind of this like own community of just in general, like under the umbrella term of like Asian, like people from the Asian diaspora, but people who grew up here, which becomes very different. Like, of course, we've talked about the struggle in trying to relate to just the Filipino culture, but also trying to relate just to the Canadian culture. So we try to find ourselves within like the, I guess, Asian North American culture, and that becomes its own thing, right?
I think a big thing also was that what is Canadian culture? It's very hard to define.
That is very difficult to define, I think.
Yeah, like all I can think of is it's just whatever wasn't the Filipino culture, like the traditional upbringings or traditional beliefs and attitudes and whatnot. I think, but then even saying that, a lot of Filipino families are not necessarily traditional. So again, what is the Canadian thing? I think I'm definitely off topic here, and sorry.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a resounding question.
Yeah. Well, we talked about that, and I mean, like, I think definitely now more so in this era, like not as much when we were kind of like in high school, but there's a lot more of an I guess it's solidified, or like people have more of an idea of what this culture is. Of this like hyphenated culture, and we've talked about this definitely like in our past episode with Alex of being in between,
the hyphen,
the hyphen, and like how obviously people from different backgrounds as well who've come from the immigrant families have the similar kind of like experiences, and that definitely differs from like if you were just come here with your entire family.
Who am I?
Basically. I mean, and as a result, I think that just it's interesting because then we kind of grow up with these different issues that we face, and that results in the different battles we face as we're adults, the different discussions about representation and stuff like that. So for example, like here in like North America, the diaspora community definitely has that big discussion of, well, we're not really represented in the media, but people people who come from media that represents them all the time, so people who have seen that coming from the Philippines, it's not as big a discussion for them. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's weird. It's the differences in beliefs and attitudes kind of carry on from I guess wherever our upbringing is. I mean, not naturally, right? But do you ever, and I had this discussion with Alex, I got to see her when I went to Edmonton, and
jealous.
Sorry.
I'm jealous.
But basically speaking, like when you see people coming from the Philippines, they have a different like belief set, and we kind of just look at it like, whoa, that's so odd because that's not our belief set, in the way that we carry the belief sets of our parents, but it becomes kind of frozen in time because they leave the country at a certain point in their life in a certain time period, and obviously, like once they leave, the beliefs and the traditions evolve later on.
They shift.
So we kind of see that weird kind of, I don't want to call it archaic. We have a more, I guess, quote unquote traditional point of view as opposed to like people. I'm gonna bring in like a kind of personal story here, and it's a little embarrassing, but there was I was on Tinder and there was this person I was talking to who'd come from Manila a while back, and I really had to check myself and my privilege based on the way that I was speaking. So I was talking about like how I was going to go visit the Philippines and how I didn't really want to go out because it's going to be hot, and he's just like, why don't you just get halo, and I'm just like, but it's going to be too hot. He's like, we have like Uber Eats now, right? And I was just like, oh, snap. Oh, my God. Like, to this mindset, like, I know the Philippines is in a very modern era, but in my mindset, it was what I remember it as.
I think describing it as frozen in time is very accurate.
Yeah.
That, like, definitely anything that I learned, like, myself, I would say I didn't grow up in too much of a Filipino household, but even the things that I learned from my parents that were more traditional, they were definitely not the same thing as when I went there, even when I was 12.
Yeah.
Even when I was, next time I went, I was 24. So like, it was definitely like, for example, when I first went there, my father was like, oh, the music, it's going to be really slow, you were not going to like it. I mean, besides the fact that I do love oldies, right? Like, even he was saying like, oh, it's not like the music you listen to nowadays. And I was 12, so that was still like early 2000s, late 90s, right? And then I went there and it was all literally almost the same stuff I listened to here, but a little more like Asian pop. Like, I remember F4 was so big there, and I was obsessed. But like, definitely like, them not having gone for like, I think 8 years by that point, or whatever, or like, no, 10 years by that point, just that decade.
Yeah. So it's a little outdated.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That definitely plays like a big part in it.
But of course, because like the only limited like connection that we have to it is that we are their children. And
yes.
we get their experiences, and we kind of transfer that onto our own.
But nowadays, like, the internet, information and culture sharing is a great equalizer. Like, for example, what we're listening to a lot lately, 88 Rising, and how movements like that is helping bridge cultures to pop culture.
So if you guys aren't familiar, a quick recap: 88 Rising is kind of this North American label, and they're bringing artists over from the East, but they do very like Western music.
Yeah.
And so like, and they're also taking artists from the West and kind of bringing them over to the East. So it's a kind of like that mishmash of cultures.
Have we played any 88 Rising before?
No.
But today we are.
We are going to play one today. But before we get into that, we just want to remind again our listeners, this pitch, sorry, that we have a fall member drive.
You love doing it, don't you?
Oh, Lord. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main things to consider here is that it is a very community-driven station. Like, we do this because we love it, and a lot of the people that are here are volunteers. And we spend a lot of time and we're very passionate about what we do here because we believe that the messages that we want out there, the stories that we want out there is worth knowing about and sharing with the communities around us, I believe all of our shows are produced by volunteers, and and I've talked about this before, it does become somewhat a labor of love, let's say that. There's a lot of time that we put into this to produce the shows every week in order to like bring new content every single time. There's a lot of creative energy and just administrative energy that goes into it, and everybody's just they just keep doing it, and it's great, and there's just so much love and care put into like every bit of this station. And the station, we do operate on a limited budget. For the most part, we are member funded. And so it really does help whenever someone, like, even if it's like $5, it does make a difference in how we're able to maintain the programming up here. We provide space for people who wouldn't necessarily get access to the airwaves otherwise, which I think is really important. A lot of people nowadays, there's still, even if media is so widely available, there's still some barriers of entry, and having an opportunity to be able to have our voices heard on a medium that has such a reach I mean, we have a worldwide reach now, right?
Yes, for sure.
We're not like, and the lower mainland reach as well for the airwaves is like pretty wide. So I mean, we love what we do. We want to share it with everybody that listens here on Co-op Radio. So if you guys have a bit of like extra resources, like we would never ask if you are unable to, but if you do have some extra resources, please consider donating to us. Yeah, as we said earlier today, you are able to donate online on coopradio.org. I believe there is a donate button at the top menu. Or you can call us on the phone, 604-684-8494.
And now to introduce our next song. It's called 18, and there are a million artists on it. Just kidding, just 5. So it's by Chris Wu, Rich Brian, Joji, Trippie Redd, and Bauer.
But first, a word from Co-op Radio. You're listening to Kahit Saan here on Jeepney Cafe, only on 100.5 CFRO, Vancouver's Co-op Radio.
That song, when I first heard it, the thing in the middle made me think that it changed songs.
Oh yeah,
definitely, because there's a totally
Joji's part.
Yeah, A part, B part. So it's just it was a very interesting track, I think. But I was very like, looking at my phone, being like,
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really like the song when it first came out a while back, and then I super got into one of the artists on that track, and now I'm trash for it. Anyway,
you want to tell us who?
No, it's okay.
Sad boy hours.
Okay, it's not relevant. Anyway, yeah. So I think just kind of coming off of that, 88 Rising, or as we were discussing earlier, is a company that's trying to do like the back and forth between the East and the West, and I'm not. I think. I'm not going to say these are confirmed because I wasn't able to confirm it, but I believe that Brian Puspus was also once signed with them, like way back.
Really?
Yeah, like,
I didn't know.
Did you know that he made music?
Yes, I think so, but
he's more a choreographer. I think people know him as a choreographer.
But I feel like I've seen him choreograph to his own songs, and I just didn't realize it was his song kind of thing.
Oh, that's fair.
So, but I didn't know that he was possibly signed there. We'll find out, I guess.
We'll find out.
To the Google.
Yeah, but I think like it does go back to the idea that, you know, like with the changing of the cultures and stuff like that, the internet and the culture exchange through there, like it's an equalizer now. Like the people who, I mean, I'm gonna count myself into this, but who have kind of like more archaic ideas of what life is like in the Philippines kind of have to like, hey, realize we're all kind of very similar in the way that we act because we're all exposed to a lot of the same things now.
You mean
right?
like first, second gen who like us?
Yeah, because like the same content that we are now having access to, people in Asia also have access to, and they're also watching it. And there's also that culture exchange. You know, they become a lot of the, I guess, what would be considered Western aspects of culture are now also being part of the normalized popular culture there.
It's true. A lot of the things that I couldn't, like when I, well, also you're 12, so you don't really know what you're talking about. But like when I was 12 and I was talking to like literally my 17 cousins or whatever it was at that point, I could relate to none of them. It was like we had nothing in common. Like there was no popular something. I think like the first thing I could ever talk to one of my cousins about, like years later, even after that, was Harry Potter.
Right.
And then after that, by the time I visited when I was 24, I was like, I could talk about almost everything, like except for stuff that was very specific to Vancouver, of course. But just anything that was in media, it was easy to talk about because like they were all on YouTube, Instagram, etc., etc.
It's really accessible now, and I think to kind of like give fairness to it, like those are the things that can kind of like bridge the divide between like the different belief sets and culture. You know, there's always something that we can find as base level kind of like things that we have in common. But I mean, like in more than that, like is what I think one of the questions now at least has been permeating through my head for quite a while is are there like systemic ways that we can kind of like fix this divide? And I'm not saying like at a government level. I'm saying like maybe things like programs that could be run by community members. Maybe there are right now. I mean, I believe there are certain co-ops that do try to like help immigrants assimilate more into like North American culture and at least try to navigate the systems around that as well.
Well, like specifically regarding that and thinking of expanding upon it, what would you say are the certain privileges that we have as Filipino Canadian, in your opinion?
Okay. Oh, well, okay. In regards to that, I think because we already know how to navigate the systems here.
Like systems such as, like, for example?
Like banking systems and things.
Okay.
Yeah, banking systems and housing systems and things like that. So we have access
everyday
to
stuff that we grew up with.
Yeah, but it becomes a big part of life because you're a new immigrant. You don't necessarily know how to deal with that. So like, not only are you trying to be culturally like more like where you're coming from, but you also have to kind of like give yourself a crash course on these things, right?
Definitely.
It's not easy, especially because there's a lot of these things that require a lot of applications, and you know, people who come in with like English as their second language is not easy. Like reading legal jargon and things like that is not necessarily the easiest thing. So I think in that respect, things like, you know, or having like lawyers and stuff like that, being an accessible kind of resource would be very helpful in
I
that
think
respect.
that there's some,
But there's also, I do have to also like point out very culturally as well, before we get into that, accents are very we kind of take it for granted, but there's still a lot of prejudice that go against people who have English as their second language. And so us, like, we are able to overcome a lot of obstacles as people who come here and sound like we're naturally from here, like even on the phone, or like people have certain, like, we are able to surpass those prejudices that that people usually have to face when, because you know, like, there's, I'm not saying everybody feels or has done this, but sometimes there's this tendency for people to think that if you can't speak English well, then you must not be smart. When in fact, it's kind of like the opposite.
It's an overarching, like, internalized racism. A lot of that, what happens. But just regarding like the program that you were talking about and like the crash course, the great thing about today is that I live around the Joyce Collingwood area, and so therefore when I voted, I went to that community center, the Renfrew one, or whatever it was, Joyce Collingwood Community Center, and they had all this, like, not, you know, excessive amounts, but there was like 2 or 3 or 4 flyers regarding those who are new immigrants, and like learning about certain things, bring your families, and and like it looked like from reading them quickly, they seemed like a bunch of crash courses on certain things that, like you said, that we take for granted. So I think
we need to kind of take that to the next level, because that does tend to just have a pool of people who are just from that immigrant kind of like population, and we're not really seeing like a cultural amalgamation from people who are already here, besides the workers already involved in there.
I
guess community building is what
the
I'm
reason
looking
why
at.
I pointed it out is because I do agree with you, because it's not enough, because like if I hadn't had walked into that center, like knowing not knowing, but like if I had not walked into that center today for other reasons, I wouldn't have seen this, and not everybody in that community goes through there, and so therefore, like, people don't even know those things exist. Not as many people will be able to go to them, and then without the numbers to really to see the need for it, then expanding that kind of programming and making it more accessible to everybody else is harder. So it's like that. I think that there's that barrier of like, how do we get it more programming like that, and for a bigger population of people who need it. I
do think that one of the baseline kind of like things is community, like programs done by the community, although it's difficult to run these without the funding, but that's another story. I think it's really big. And I mean, I remember going into a Q&A for like a program before, and I remember asking them how they thought that they would actually the Filipino club. I went into one of their like info sessions, and I asked them, well, what do you guys think you're going to do in regards to trying to bridge the gap? And because there's just so much that goes into it, one of the founders did say, I don't know if they have to be the ones to bridge the gap, because there's already...
Wait, sorry, who are we talking about specifically to bridge the gap?
To bridge the gap. The school club that we know about, the Filipino community, the ones that were trying to help new immigrants come in.
So the question is that you're not sure if they're the ones who are supposed to.
Yeah, that was their answer. I mean, there were the other answers that's just like, oh, we'd love to eventually, but one of the other answers was they don't know if they could be the ones to do it, or if they're the right people to do it, because there's already so much that goes into it, like at a higher level, and even just like the community level, and just trying to make sure that everybody's doing okay and everybody's adjusted, that the cultural aspect of it and trying to like make sure that everybody gets along very well is a big kind of like discussion on its own.
And just to pinpoint something that not necessarily was what you were just talking about, I just want to, from something you were talking about earlier, that I think that like I've never seen an accentism class, like an accent, like, and everything I've seen regarding reducing accents has been regarding the acting world, and those are just literally breaking in as actors. But people need that. So I think that's definitely something that has been completely neglected. Like maybe there are out there, and I think if you know of them, you should contact us so we can like. There's so many people I know who would definitely benefit from that.
Yeah.
So, communities.
Yeah.
I think definitely that is
one
big
of the main answers.
Big communities. And speaking of our communities,
yes.
Going back to Co-op Radio, and like Ella here said, we're all volunteers. They sacrifice a lot. For example, like I see Elle here, like fully dedicated all the time to creating the program that we have for you every month. And really, I don't do much. I show up and
you do a lot.
Well, so. I discuss things with you, but definitely all
help me with idea generation.
The grunt work definitely is still her, and she spends hours and hours on this stuff. So I know that like a lot of times people think, oh, radio, you just go on and talk for an hour or you just play stuff, but there's a lot of thought that goes into it. So the fact that this radio station exists for us to have a platform for that, like I think we are endlessly grateful for that. And so if besides donating, and again I'll say the donation information now and again at the end of what I'm talking about, but you can donate online, coopradio.org, or donate on the phone, 604-684-8494. You can also become a member, and doesn't matter what membership level you give, all members are equal. You can pay yearly or pay monthly. The annual membership is like $60, and the next tier is $100, $250, $500. But you can do something like a monthly sustainer, which is $10 a month or $15 or $20. And there's also pay what you want. You can be a member for $10 or $30 or $300 or whatever you want to give. So if you think that, oh, I want to support this and I think it's a good thing, if it's only, you can only spare $10 a month, that's amazing. That's great. And I think that don't judge yourself based on that, because that little bit really helps people, not only other programming on the station, but it also helps us as well, who really just want to keep bringing you content and whatnot. So you can choose the membership level that's right for you. If you go to coopradio.org, you can click donate, or you can find contact information there if you have further questions. We, of course, you can contact us for it. Not necessarily that we're going to know everything, but we definitely will.
We'll look
connect
into it.
you.
Definitely,
we'll look into it for you, or we'll connect you with the right people. But for sure, if you want to get involved, it's we don't. Especially if you are someone who's in the Lower Mainland, or someone else who's listening who wants to get involved with us too. You can always contact us, and we'll say our email near to the end of the show and whatnot. But on social media, we're also the name of the show, Kahit, Saan, Paman. So definitely, if you want to be a member, if you want to help donate to Co-op Radio, this is definitely a great opportunity for you to do it. It's the right time, and you should.
All right.
Think.
Anyway, we're just coming to the end of the show. We want to thank our listeners for listening to us today and joining us. And we'll make sure that you check out the shows right afterwards coming up here on Co-op Radio. The reggae show usually comes up after us, and they always have amazing music. We also encourage our listeners to check out the other shows hosted here at Jeepney Cafe every Saturday at 5 p.m. We next week have, I believe, Balik Bayan Mixtape, and then afterwards I think we also have Pinoy Rainbow and The Takeover.
Remember that you can find past shows on the Co-op Radio website, as well as a live stream link to listen to the shows from anywhere in the world. We also keep an archive of our own shows on our website, as well as a playlist of the music you listen to today. You can find them at kahitsaanpaman.ca. You can also get in touch with us. Continue the conversation. Our email is contact@kahitsaanpaman.ca. Again, that's contact@kahitsaanpaman.ca. We also have Instagram and Twitter that we sometimes keep active. Our handle is the same thing. Name of the show, Kahit Saan Paman. We'll be back again next month.
Yep. And this last song is that we're going to play you out with this song by a local duo named Manila Gray, and the song is called Backhouse Bounce. And thank you again for listening to us here at Kahit Saan Paman on Jeepney Cafe, only on 100.5 CFRO, Vancouver's Co-op Radio.